You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode number 74. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the podcast. It's Paula here. I am so delighted to have you here this week. I hope you are having a wonderful, wonderful week. If you're new, welcome. I think you've picked a great episode to start out with. Today, we are talking about leadership, and whether you're a practicing lawyer or law adjacent or a professional woman, I just wanted to highlight what I think we all know, which is we need more women leaders. And whether that means that you are occupying an official title, an official leadership role, or whether you're taking on more leadership within your existing role, it's so important that we have more of you, more representation by you within our organizations. And I think today's episode is going to help you with that. Before we dive in, I just wanted to, number one, extend a shout out to Mother Nature. Is that a thing? Am I allowed? It is such a beautiful day. I'm in Vancouver, Canada. It is sunny. We are in early October. We have not had very much rain at all this fall, which is highly unusual. And I love the rain. It serves many purposes, but it has been such a blessing to have clear blue skies. The leaves on the trees are turning colors. We've got the yellows, the reds, some of the remaining greens. We just had our Canadian Thanksgiving long weekend. It was amazing. We were able to get together as a family without all the COVID weirdness. And we all felt so grateful for that. And wherever you are, I just wanted to extend more gratitude. Gratitude to you for tuning in and joining me today. Gratitude for you taking an interest in your own leadership and what you're going to learn together today. On the topic of gratitude, I also want to extend a very special shout out. I was looking at my podcast the other day. I was getting some titles to send to somebody, and I noticed a review that was left by Martha Beatrice. And Martha, I wanted to read your review. It was so heartwarming. I was so happy to receive it. It is a 5-star review entitled Inspiring. And Martha says, Paula's podcast is a humble gem. She offers smart and doable strategies for both finding hope and agency in challenging situations and crafting your life and career with purpose. I am so grateful to have found this resource. I am so grateful for this beautiful review. Thank you so much. It means the world to me when I hear feedback from you and the impact that this podcast is having on you. So thank you so much. Now, we're going to turn to today's topic, which is leadership. It's about leadership, confidence, authority. It's about stepping into your authority as a leader with confidence. These are all concepts that I think many of us aspire to. We think about in the abstract, but we don't always know what to do or what actions to take or how to go about doing that. So today we are going to talk about what leadership can look like for you. We're going to talk about the discomfort that comes along as you transition from where you are now to where you want to go. And you may already be in a leadership role and you are refining your leadership skills and strategies. You may be just starting out and you're on the beginning or you're at the beginning of your leadership journey. But wherever you are, as you grow and you evolve into the next level of leadership, there is that discomfort. And we're going to talk about that squarely today. We're also going to talk about creating for each of you a model of leadership that doesn't require you to change who you are. I think a lot of the discomfort that we can feel when moving into leadership stems from this idea that we've got a concept of leadership that is one thing and it doesn't align with who we truly are at our core. And so we're going to get into that as well. In today's episode, I would also invite you to think about your self-concept. If this is a thing you've never heard of before, your self-concept is really the way that you think about yourself. It's the perception that you have about yourself, about your abilities, about your limitations, about who you are. And I want you to specifically consider your self-concept as a leader, because that ultimately is the work that we're doing today. We are looking at you as a leader, defining what that's going to look like or what it already looks like, and helping you step into that. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that you may be at any stage of your leadership journey. You may be just starting out as a lawyer, in which case you are making a transition from student to law student at a law school, I should say, to student in a firm, to an articling student if you're in Canada, moving into an associate position. Then from there, you'll move up to junior, senior, associate, maybe all the way to partner. Maybe you'll stay in a law firm. Maybe you'll move to another type of organization. Maybe you start at a different organization. But wherever you are on your journey, chances are you're occupying a certain space right now, and ahead of you are leadership opportunities. Now, I think that your leadership transition starts the moment that you start practicing or training to practice as a lawyer. You might start out by having increased responsibilities when it comes to file management. You might start managing a team at a very early stage. You might have paralegals and legal assistants that are reporting to you for file work. And so you may start out, and I remember starting out that way as a lawyer, as a law student, and basically instructing a legal assistant who was very much my senior. At that point, she probably could have practiced law better than me. I was fresh out of law school. And yet I was starting to develop my leadership skills. How was I working with her? I was also working as a part of a team, right? There were the peers on the file. There were senior lawyers on the file. And of course, as you move up in years, you also move up within that whole ecosystem of your organization. And as you become more senior within your organization, you take on more of a leadership role. As a more senior lawyer, and this is where I work with a number of lawyers in that transition stage where they're going from senior associate, junior lawyer into a more advanced position within the law firm. And there, often what I'm helping them with is the relationship piece. How are they learning to build and manage a team? And that, I think, is very pertinent to today's discussion. And that might be something that resonates with you. You might be within an organization that is not a law firm, where you're going through a similar transition. You're learning how to be a leader of others, and you feel the weight of that responsibility. You're trying to define what that looks like. You may also be a sole practitioner. I've had lawyers who have come to me who have taken on firms, and they are the sole or one of few lawyers who are within that organization, and they haven't necessarily been trained on what leadership looks like. And they're stepping into that role and they want some support in that. Now, the reason that you might want to grow your leadership skills is that you're wanting to grow your practice potentially. And depending on the nature of where you are, you may also want to scale your practice. So you've seen in your practice where you have become the bottleneck, and you know that you can't multiply yourself, nor do you probably want to multiply yourself given what it is that's on your plate. Do you want to multiply yourself and do more of the work that you're already doing? Or do you want to find ways to bring in support so that you can perhaps elevate or move ahead with what it is that you are substantively working on, whether that is taking on more of a managerial role, whether that means taking on files of greater complexity, whether that means being more client facing while lawyers who support you do more of the work behind the scenes. It will look different for everybody, but I'm inviting you to think about what reasons you may have for wanting to increase your leadership within your practice. It may be also that your compensation is tied to how much you can generate in terms of work and delegate that to other lawyers. And that may be part of the way that your firm is set up, whether you are independent in your practice or whether you're part of a larger firm. There are other reasons why you want to build your leadership skills, and those may be For example, mentorship. You may want more mentorship opportunities to lead and help other lawyers grow, pull themselves up the ranks. You may want to have more influence over the way that your firm or organization is structured, the way that things are done. You may also want, the reason for today, you may want to feel better as a leader. So what I mean by this is you may want to lead with greater confidence, where you are able to assume authority without feeling like an imposter and without undermining the relationships you have formed with others. And that includes relationships with your colleagues, relationships with your clients, where you feel like if you were to step into that space of leadership, authority, that you might somehow alienate the people around you who know you in the way that you are currently. You may feel like you're actually holding yourself back. You may have this internal conflict, and so you're shying away from exerting your own influence. And as you think about what leadership might look like, what that would involve, the level of responsibility that you anticipate, you may also feel that there is some self-doubt in terms of, can you do it? Fear of what happens if you fail, maybe a lack of confidence, like you're not ready to take this on. And if you're feeling any of those things, I just want to assure you, that is completely normal. That is part of the growth process. And that is why I'm so glad that you are here with me today so that we can do that deep dive. We can take a closer look and I can help and support you in this transition that you're making. So I believe that we are all inclined and designed and really hardwired to grow. And anytime that we grow, we are going to experience discomfort. That is why we have growing pains. Speaking of which, I'm pretty sure my son has some growing pains. He was talking about his, totally off topic, talking about his leg on the walk to school this morning. And I thought, this is a real thing, right? We have growing pains. And so if you are looking to advance in a leadership position and it requires growth, that is going to be uncomfortable. And that discomfort can sometimes take over. It can start to lead the way and distract us or throw us off course from taking action or taking effective action. So, for example, you might start telling yourself that leadership is not necessarily for you, that if it was for you, that you would get noticed and someone would come and promote you. And so you put your head down and you continue to work hard, hoping that by doing so, other people will see leadership potential in you and come and get you, hoping that you'll get noticed. You might feel embarrassed to admit that you want more. And so you stay quiet. And I've seen this happen with others where they have that internal desire, they've got that drive, but they feel like it's somehow, they don't want to own it. They feel embarrassed by it. Or what if they act on it and they don't succeed? And so there can be this internal struggle where you want for more, but you don't act on it. And that can cause real inside conflict. You might have beliefs about leadership. And this came up recently where I was talking about leadership with a client and the idea of authority. And what this brings up is really that distinction between authoritarian, right? That style of leadership that can be domineering and imposing versus authoritative, where you're coming to a situation with knowledge and experience and skills. So how are you viewing leadership? Are you seeing it as hierarchical and domineering and bossy and controlling? And if so, do you have internal resistance on that basis because you do not want to see yourself in that role? And conversely, you can also go the other way. You may see leadership as something that you associate with carrying too much responsibility, where you're over nurturing the people who help you, your team members, over nurturing your clients, over accommodating. And you think of how that will deplete you, exhaust you, and you don't want that either. It may also be that you know that you want to have more influence, but you have no idea how to get there. And all you can see right now is a gap. You can see a gap between what you want, what you envision for yourself in the future, and where you are right now. And you don't know how to bridge that gap. And it may be that you're in an organization or a firm where the trajectory to get from where you are to a more advanced position, whether it's partnership or some other leadership role, maybe that trajectory is opaque. and you don't know what it takes to move ahead. Maybe the topic is taboo, and so you choose to let it drift. And what happens is you end up leaving it to chance, and you end up watching opportunities pass you by. Now, you may also be further along in your leadership journey. You may be a leader already. You may be struggling with that position because you're still trying to find your footing. Maybe you've had some resistance from members of your team. Maybe you find it awkward to ask other people for help. Maybe you struggle with feeling like you don't quite belong yet as a leader, or you feel like there's not much of a gap between you and the people that you're leading. And how can you fully show up as a leader when maybe in some cases, the people that you're leading have more skills than you in a certain area? And I can think of a lawyer I worked with who was leading a team on a particular file, and one of the junior lawyers had more experience in a particular forum than she had. And so that brought up a concern that she did not have the same level of experience. And after talking it through, we talked about how she had so much experience in other areas, so many areas where she was a mentor to this junior lawyer. And I raise this because sometimes I think we can talk ourselves out of taking on a leadership role thinking that we need to know everything, when in fact, what we're really needing to learn is how to lead. Now, you may also be reading books and taking trainings and taking courses and maybe even assembling a team around you, but you struggle to apply what it is that you're learning. And if that's the case, I would invite you to think about what it is that you have been learning, some of the skills, some of the tools, and think about how you can use today's episode to help you apply them. Now, if you can relate to what I've just described, chances are the problems that you're facing go back to those concepts I discussed at the beginning, this idea of your self-concept and the beliefs that you have about leadership. And if there is a lack of alignment between how you see yourself and where you see yourself wanting to go, you may unconsciously hold yourself back from making the transition into authority, into leadership, because you feel that internal resistance. And maybe you also worry about how others are going to receive you when you step into that role. And this resonates of self-sabotage, right? Where at some level, you just don't see it happening. And so you may unconsciously take steps or not take steps that almost undermine your efforts to become more of a leader. It may be that you haven't allowed yourself to truly imagine your own potential, or you haven't allowed yourself to step into your authority as a leader. You may also, as I mentioned earlier, have been looking to others to promote you or to instruct you, to give you permission. And if you can relate, you're absolutely not alone. And it is perfectly normal for anybody who's making that transition into leadership. And again, that's exactly why today's discussion matters so much. So I'm going to offer you 4 different strategies that you can use to help yourself advance in terms of leadership. And my goal for each of you is to ultimately develop your own style of leadership. I would invite you to develop a style where you feel confident. Your style of leadership does not have to look like your boss's style of leadership or your friend's style of leadership. You get to decide. And I want that to be a style of leadership where you get to step into your authority and feel good about it. I want you to feel empowered and confident and like you are there to make a difference, to make the impact that you so much want to make and that you know you are capable of. So I'm going to share with you these 4 suggestions. The first one is to define leadership for yourself. So it might be helpful for you to do some time traveling, not necessarily in real life. I don't think that's yet possible, but at least mentally to time travel out into the future. Make it 1 year, make it 5 years, and see yourself in the position that you would like to see yourself in. So if that means you're a partner, what does that look like when you are a partner? Not when somebody else is a partner, but you. Maybe it's 5 years from now. Maybe you've started your own firm and you have lawyers that work for you and a team and you're supported. What does leadership look like in that situation? And if you're looking for some ideas on how to explore that, to do that kind of creative work, think about what we just talked about. I mean, we've defined some of what leadership we may not want to have, right? We talked about that authoritarian, domineering, overly maybe bossy or directive. Maybe that's not the style that you're aspiring to, nor is it that over-accommodating, really overextending type of leadership. What is it for you that truly resonates? And some of the ideas that come to mind for me might be going first, right? A leader by definition goes first. So what does that look like for you? Leadership can be strong, decisive, influential. It might be supportive. You may be a visionary. You may be a leader who finds a way to reach consensus. So think about what resonates with you, because this is you defining your style of leadership, nobody else's. Another way you can look at this is to look at leaders that you admire and think about what qualities they have, what skills, what traits they possess that you admire in them. And I would invite you to go further than just thinking about this. I would invite you to create an actual list. Write it out on paper. I did this work with a client and she did write out a list. She wrote out exactly what it meant for her to be a leader. And this list, it was very helpful for her because number one, it gave her guidance. Here's how she has defined leadership. So she was able to check in on whether or not she was adhering to her own principles. And it came in handy, especially when she had situations that brought up conflict or discomfort. She was able to go through those experiences and then check back in with herself. Did she follow her own model of leadership? And if the answer was yes, that brought some comfort. I'd also invite you to think about what leadership books you might want to read. And there are many books about leadership. I certainly do not know all of them. What I can tell you, and I'm going to share a couple of titles because they've been recommended to me and I have read them and I think they're great. One is Brené Brown's Dare to Lead. She has a very heart-centered, courage-oriented approach to leadership that I think would resonate with a lot of aspiring leaders who want to lead differently from a place of courage, from that place of being a true leader in the inspiring and visionary sense of it. I also was referred to Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor, which I like because what she talks about is being direct with your feedback. And I think sometimes we can really struggle, especially as women, to deliver feedback that we think is going to hurt somebody else. We don't want to hurt feelings. And so we hold ourselves back from being truly direct with the people that we are giving feedback to. And sometimes what that person needs to hear is the truth as we see it. And the truth is, of course, subjective to the leader or the person who's delivering it. And I talk about this in an earlier podcast episode, actually, where I talk about feedback and giving feedback. And ultimately, what is, I think, very interesting about that book is that it paints how it's actually really helpful for the person who's receiving the feedback to hear your honest feedback, how that actually helps them grow. It helps organizations thrive. So those are just a couple of suggestions, but I would invite you to think about what resonates with you, what books on leadership you want to read, where you feel like that's going to help you grow and evolve in your capacity as a leader. So that's step one, is to define leadership for yourself. Step two is to lead yourself first. And there's this lovely quote. I just saw it the other day. The Greek philosopher Plato said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." Now, I'll pause for a minute and just say that I don't think the leadership style that we are talking about here today necessarily involves conquering anybody, including yourself. So let's maybe take the conquering out of it, but leading yourself, right? The first and greatest victory. I think that our ability to lead ourselves is absolutely the starting place. I have a whole podcast episode. It is episode number 11. I think it's called How to Be Your Own Best Boss, where I dive deep into leading yourself with compassion and grace. And that is where I would invite you to start. Leadership of others, I think, is an inside and then an outside job. Please do not skip this step. What I would invite you to focus on is all those skills that you highlighted as being the skills of good leaders. Apply those to yourself. If it's being decisive, if it's being influential, what else? If you're being a compassionate leader, how do you exercise self-compassion? If it's clarity, how do you allow yourself to get clear on what's important to you? How do you treat yourself in a way that is sustainable and fair? And this is so important because when you treat yourself a certain way, you're actually instructing others to treat you that same way. And as I say this and you hear those words from me, I would invite you to think about situations where you have had a certain self-concept, where maybe you've believed a certain thing about yourself. Maybe it's a belief of self-confidence and you saw how other people reacted and responded to that confidence. Maybe it was the opposite. It was self-doubt and fear and how others responded to that fear or doubt. So that internal messaging is really powerful, not only for how you lead yourself, but how others receive you. So that is step number 2. After you've defined leadership for yourself, step 1 is number 2, lead yourself first. Now, the third strategy is a fun one, and it is totally counterintuitive, and I think you're going to love it. It involves a few steps. You will need a pen and paper to do this. I don't think you can really do it in your head. You could try, but you won't get the same results. And that is to list out number 1, I'd invite you to think about going from where you are, so you're here, and then where it is that you want to go. You're there. And to bear in mind, a quote, it's attributed to Einstein, the thinking that got you here is not the same thinking that will get you there. So we've got this concept of here and we've got this concept of there. And I want you to look at your here. And let's acknowledge, first of all, you're here. Your here is you're a lawyer, you're a law student, you are practicing, you have practiced and you've moved into another type of role. Wherever it is, you have accomplished a great number of things. You hold a certain position in your organization, you have experience, you have skills, whatever it is that you are, let's just acknowledge you're here. And then let's look at your there. And looking at your here, I would like you to make a list of all the strategies that you have employed that got you to where you are. So the list I'm going to go through, I'm just going to give you some examples. These are examples that may resonate with you. Doing everything, that might be one of your strategies, working hard, doing it all. Researching everything, avoiding conflict might be a strategy. Doing everything yourself, getting really good, being really independent, getting the A+. So those are the skills I'm going to list out, and then I'm going to go through the exercise with you. And I would invite you to think about what some of the skills are that got you to where you are right now. And you can do this almost like a T-bar. And you're going to put on the left-hand side the here and the strategies that got you here. Then what I'm going to invite you to do is to make a list on the other side of that T-bar, and we're going to create a list of the strategies that will get you there. And here's the really fun part. And this is an exercise I did the other day. I did it with someone I was working with, and it was fascinating because it actually aligned with growth. And if you take the here strategy and write out the opposite, is that what you need to do to get there? And I'm going to walk you through some examples and think about it and see if this applies to you. So, for example, if the strategy that got you here was to do everything and work really hard and take on all different assignments and work with all the people and take on all the clients, when you reach a certain point in your practice where you can be more decisive, when you have more choice, maybe the next strategy isn't do everything. The next strategy is to constrain. So think about yourself 5 years out. Maybe this is your there. In that version of yourself, what are you saying no to that you're currently saying yes to? What do you need to be more discerning about? How do you need to show up differently with your clients? What are some of the things that you're doing right now that maybe you do not want to do going forward? I talked about this over nurturing, over accommodating. Are you making yourself more available than you truly want to be making yourself available? And can you constrain? Can you constrain maybe the office hours that you are available? Can you constrain the area of your focus? Can you constrain the type of client that you're working with? So ask yourself, if your initial strategy was do everything, work hard, take it all on, what if your new strategy was the opposite, which was to do less, to constrain? What are you routinely doing right now? Versus what might you start delegating to others? So that was number 1 of my list of examples. I've got 5 different strategies, and I'm going to invite you to follow along with me and think about how these might apply to you. So the next strategy is research everything. If that was your strategy to get here, and in law school, there's a ton of research. In your early years of practice, there is often a lot of research. And you're probably researching not just substantive law, but also how to execute, whether you're a litigator or a solicitor. What are the best practices that you need to learn? And when you're first starting out, that is an enormous part of the job. And with law, it always evolves. So yes, there will be continued learning. But the opposite of that research is to apply it. And so if you look at where you are kind of maybe holding yourself back because you're staying in that mode of wanting to learn everything. I talked about perfectionism last podcast. You might go back to that and gave the analogy of jumping into a swimming pool. If you're with a group of cohorts, for example, and the objective is to learn how to swim, and you're there with your peers on the edge of the pool, and everybody else jumps in and starts swimming, and you're standing there researching the perfect stroke, the perfect water temperature, the perfect swimsuit, whatever it is, you're not going to get that hands-on experience. And so if your initial strategy was to learn it all, to research it all, maybe the strategy that got you here, the strategy that will get you there is to just dive in. And this is a key point of distinction for leadership. It's that willingness to step into the arena, that willingness to go first. It may mean leading the file. It may be stating your opinion. It may mean trying the case. Whatever it means for you, I would invite you to think about what that looks like when you decide to start applying. Not to say that you don't continue to research where it's necessary, but let's move into action. A third strategy, avoiding conflict. So if you have gotten to where you are by pleasing others, by being available, avoiding boundaries and setting those up, what if your new strategy was to do the opposite? What if your new strategy is to set boundaries about the type of work you're going to do, who you're going to work with, how much work, on what timelines, where you fit within the organization? Maybe it's setting up boundaries in your dealings with colleagues or clients who aren't treating you with the respect that you want to be treated with. When you start seeing yourself as an authority, and think about this for a minute, if you truly saw yourself as an authority, what would change about your relationship with your clients, with your peers, with lawyers that you're providing instructions to, lawyers you're receiving instructions from? How do you approach those conversations differently? Do you shy away from conflict, or do you engage in those difficult conversations so that you can set boundaries? And what this may require of you is letting go of the need to be liked, letting go of the need to be accommodating, letting go of the need to be easy to get along with. And in exchange, what you'll get is that authority, right? That sense of owning who you are, that sense of valuing yourself, that sense of leadership. So that may be another strategy. It's abandoning that desire to be available and accommodating to everybody, avoiding conflict, and instead allowing yourself to step into those difficult situations and assert what you need. A fourth strategy might have been going it alone versus building a team. So if you've gotten to the point that you're at by being really self-sufficient and learning how to do everything and doing it perfectly and being that go-to person for everybody else, maybe that next level requires that you stop being that go-to person for everybody else. You stop being entirely self-sufficient and really find a way to build up your team. And that can be really hard. You might feel uncomfortable delegating to others to do the work. You might feel guilty. You might think that that's something that you should be doing, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's time that you let that go and somebody else gets to take that on and you can free yourself up for other things. And maybe for delegating, you might feel like it's a challenge, and it is a challenge, especially at the beginning. You're not perfect, and yet you're asking people to be perfect, perhaps, or maybe it's the time invested in that initial delegation task. Maybe it's feeling like you're imposing on others, which can be a challenge. So if delegating is holding you back, maybe that's an area where you need to learn and step into more of a leadership position. And I've got a podcast episode. It's episode number 44, where I talk about delegating without drama. So you might want to check that one out. And just going back to the boundaries conversation, I have a couple of podcast episodes about boundaries. You might want to listen to episode 62, which is how to say no without burning bridges. So that really is talking about those uncomfortable conversations. Finally, with respect to this point, if your strategy has been to go it alone and now you're focused on building a team, it really does involve going out and being selective about who you want on your team. And this is an exercise I do with clients. Who do you want on your team? And how can you go about creating those relationships with those individuals. One more in terms of strategy, and that's that A+ strategy. And this is one that might be really hardwired deep within your soul, deep within your psyche. If you've always been a good student, you've been that straight A student, and now we are trying to evolve and lead, there may be no A+ that you can get, right? It may be that you've been kind of hooked on external validation, somebody else, some outside organization giving you that rubber stamp. And what I would invite you to consider is that for this next level of leadership, you are the one who sets the standards and you are the one who chooses to live into them. So going back to our definition of leadership, the exercise I did with the client that I mentioned where we set out the parameters for leadership, what if you set out those parameters for yourself and let that be your guide instead of looking to others to give you that approval? So just to recap where we are is number one, I've offered 3 strategies at a broad level. Number 1 is to define leadership for yourself. Number 2 is to lead yourself first. And then the third strategy, which gets confusing because it's all about strategies, is to list out your past success strategies and then to create new ones. So the strategies that we talked about there's 5 of them, was doing everything versus constraining, number 1. 2, researching everything versus applying your research. Number 3, avoiding conflict versus going into those difficult conversations. Number 4 was going it alone versus building a team. And number 5 is going for that A+ versus shifting the validation from outside of yourself to shifting that validation inward. And that leads us to the last suggestion that I have, which is to step into your authority now. So we've been talking about our definition in relation to a future time, right? You in the future as leader. Now that we've done that exercise, now that we've defined what it looks like, let's just start practicing as much as you can those skills today. You do not have to wait. It is absolutely okay for you to start taking these steps and to see what challenges come up for you, whether these are internal obstacles that hold you back from stepping into your authority, or maybe they're external obstacles, resistance that you get from others. And if you need some suggestions on how to be in that leadership role now, I'd invite you to listen to podcast episode 55. It's called Do Less, Be More. And it's all about stepping into your identity and letting your actions flow from your self-concept effectively. Now, the reason that these strategies will work is that number 1, you are defining yourself from a point in the future and then working backwards. This is a really effective goal setting strategy that applies to leadership as well as other goals that you might set for yourself. So that is one reason, is you're getting clear about your desired outcome, and then you get to create the path to get there. You're consciously choosing a leadership style that aligns with who you are. So if somebody comes up to you and says, you need to become a leader and here's what I expect of you, it can be really hard sometimes to get behind that because you may not agree with what that leadership role looks like. When you do the work yourself, when you come up with a definition yourself and then you align yourself with it, it is so much easier because you are connected with the vision and it aligns with who you are at your core. So there's so much less resistance and so much less discomfort. Once you define what leadership looks like for you, you will start to notice how you're stepping into it. So your awareness will be raised. You will notice opportunities. And when you think of yourself as a leader, as an authority, you'll start to feel more empowered. You'll feel influential. And from that point, you'll make decisions that align with that authority, that align with that power. You'll take actions and you'll start to influence those around you. The skills that you will need to focus and create a vision of what leadership looks like for you and define your roadmap to get there. It requires a willingness to self-reflect. This podcast episode, if you have been following me, if you have been thinking about how this applies to you, you have already taken that first step. You are already reflecting on yourself. And this is a huge part of defining that leadership that emanates from within. You will need to look for opportunities to apply what you've learned. So it's wonderful to do this work. It's wonderful to think about what leadership looks like. And when it comes time to apply it and that resistance comes up, The resistance might be from the discomfort of shifting who you are. So we talked about your success strategies. If you have been accommodating up until this point, and that's been part of what has made you successful, and your next level of leadership requires that you be more discerning, that you start setting boundaries, that will feel hard. That will bring up resistance and discomfort. But as long as it's aligned with who you are and who you want to be as a leader, it is worth that work. And the more you do it, the more you're going to align yourself with who you want to be as a leader. The results that you will create is, number one, you will become a more confident leader and you will step into your authority. You will create opportunities that you don't yet have, and you'll create an impact in a way that aligns with your professional goals. You will inspire others as they see you step into leadership. They will be inspired to grow and ultimately to lead themselves. And finally, as you master this skill of defining for yourself what leadership looks like and doing the work to step into that, you will learn the skill of evolving as a leader. And chances are, if you envision yourself as a leader 1 year out, 5 years out, you will ultimately get there and there will be a new milestone. There will be a new vision that you will have for yourself as a leader. And having gone through this process already, you now know exactly what it is that you need to do. So, my friend, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you have really internalized today's message, that you are now feeling inspired to go out and step into leadership within your practice. If you would like to go deeper in this work, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can email me, fill out a form, submit it on my website. I'd love to hear from you and I'd love to support you. I would also love to invite you to share this podcast with anybody who you think would benefit from it. If you would like to leave a review, I would love that, of course. And I also wanted to mention that I'll be making an announcement in a couple of weeks about an opportunity that I am creating for women lawyers just like you to work with me in a whole new way. And I'm really excited about announcing this opportunity. It has been a long time in the making, and I think it is going to be so impactful, and I'm really hoping that it's an idea that resonates with you and that it's something that you're going to want to join me on. So stay tuned. That I expect will be in a couple of weeks. I think it's November 2nd or November 3rd that the episode will go live, and I am really excited to share that with you. So for all of you, I hope you are having a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you again for tuning in, and I am so excited to reconnect with you again next week. That's all. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.